So if you're a hot rodder or an aspiring racer, or just a general performance enthusiast, this is probably going to be the most important video you'll ever watch, right? Because we're going to talk about finding hidden performance. Because it's there, it's all over your vehicle. You have to dig it out, you have to find it. But there are concepts involved here. And I think the best way to illustrate this, or the best way to visualize this, is that think of your vehicle, car, truck, motorcycle, whatever it is that you're looking to improve the performance on or race. Think of it like an athlete, okay? So all humans are born with the basic equipment that it takes to be a human. All right, and so they function, some better than others. Genetics plays a role. Some people are born to be faster runners. Some people are born to be better dancers. Some people are born to be singers. Some people are born to be deep thinkers, okay? Genetics has a role to do with it. But in general, all humans are built with the basic things needed to function as a human. Okay, all vehicles are the same way. All vehicles are born with all of the basic functions necessary to be a vehicle. Some of them accelerate quicker, some of them handle better, some of them stop better, some of them get better fuel mileage. But the point is, they all have the basic equipment. All right, now you take your human and you want your human to be an athlete. You want it to be a baseball player or a hockey player or whatever it happens to be, okay, a runner, you know, a track and field type of person. I'm so removed from all of that. I don't even know what to call them. But the concept, all right, a boxer. The concept is you can't just focus on one aspect of this athlete's performance. You have to work on all aspects of their performance. So you don't just build the muscles and the systems that are necessary to do that one particular task. You have to work on all of them, right? So the metabolism has to be up to snuff. Everything has to be up to snuff, right? If you're working on, let's say, the top end muscles of your body, because the athletic thing that you need to do requires upper body strength or agility or whatever it happens to be, you still have to pay attention to the bottom of the body too, because it has the foundation that the top of the body uses to do whatever it's going to do. All right, you get the general idea. Building or modifying a car for performance is no different than training as an athlete. So everything has to be taken into consideration. So now I'm going to use this throttle body as the example of what I'm talking about, but don't get hung up. And this is not about throttle bodies, and it's not about Jeep throttle bodies. It's about the system, okay? The system of seeking performance, finding the hidden performance and maximizing everything the same way an athlete, they not only do they do, you know, the weight training and endurance training, but they also do the diet and they do the sleep and they do all of the different aspects, the vitamins, whatever it happens to be. You know, steroids, kind of like nitrous oxide, right? You get the general idea? All right. So don't get hung up on this being about a throttle body or about being a Jeep throttle body. This applies across the board. And what I'm going to talk about here applies no matter what you're working on, okay? So this is the throttle body off of our Mission Improbable Jeep. And the whole purpose of Mission Improbable is to take this 1996 XJ and using nothing but the parts it was born with or replacement parts that are very specific for the 1996 XJ. So in other words, no hot rod parts, no aftermarket speed equipment, and no mixing and matching from other. Because every time we do a video on this series, there's always in the comments, use these injectors, use that throttle body, use these gears, use this. Yeah, I know, all of those things are great. I get it. But that's not the mission of Mission Improbable. The mission of Mission Improbable is to work only with the parts it was, born with, or correct parts for that year, make, and model. That's the whole point of the exercise. All right. So for the last several months, we've been working on it, pulling weight out of it, working on the suspension, working on all these different areas, right? Tightening them up or loosening them up, as the case may be, or eliminating them, as the case may be. But the idea is refining the chassis of it before we go into the engine. So last time out, I feel that we hit a plateau. We were not going to be able to get any more ET out of this thing. We've gone as quick as 935 with an average of about a 940. It really wants to run 940s with a 260 foot. Now this is with a completely bone stock 4 liter, right? It's like nothing done to this engine. So I feel that after the last time out, we have hit the plateau. We're not going to be able to go any quicker until we make more power. It's fine. This is good. This is a level. It's a plateau. Now we know how to go to the next step. So on the last run that we made the other night, I wanted to experiment with something. So what I had noticed, now remember, being in tune with your vehicle is a lot like if you're an athlete, you have to be in tune with your body, right? It's the same thing. You have to know the vehicle. You have to know all of its, what is it asking for? You have to pay attention to it. It's telling you things every time you run it out, every time you run it down the track or bang it up through the gears or whatever, it's talking to you. It's telling you things, and you have to be receptive to what it's saying. So one of the things it's been saying to me is, I need more air, right? Give me more air. All right. So we made a cold air setup to pull air from the cowl, cooler air from the cowl area rather than pulling air from under the hood. And that did help. We picked up almost 2 miles an hour just with that mode modification. But one of the things that I noticed is so you're driving this thing along at 3/4 throttle, let's say 3/4 throttle to full throttle, there's a difference, okay? Now, most vehicles, and especially stocker, like low performance vehicles, like this XJ started out as, you get your greatest difference at small throttle openings, okay? So in other words, from idle to just, let's say, 1/8 throttle or 1/4 throttle, you're just cracking it open. There's a drastic difference, right? Because obviously you're going from idle to this thing's moving, it's accelerating. And then the more you open the throttle, the less reaction there is. Until you get to around 3/4 throttle. When you get to about 3/4 throttle, the difference between 3/4 throttle and full throttle is generally kind of non-existent. Because a lower performance engine does not need really all that air. Right? It's not asking for all that air. You're giving it more air by giving it more foot. But it's not necessarily asking for it. So what you'll find is, like I said, from idle, at rest, to let's say 1/4 throttle, huge, massive difference in throttle position. But now from 3/4 to full throttle, almost no difference. You're not really going to sense anything, it's not going to really make any more power. It'll get louder, but not really working. Well, what I found with this Jeep was that from 3/4 throttle to full throttle, there's a notable difference. You can feel it. And what that's telling me is that it wants more air. It needs more air. So remember, we're limited to working only with the stock parts. On that last run, what I did was just to see, okay, right before I pulled out onto the track, I unplugged the power brake vacuum hose, and I unplugged, or I uncapped one of the vacuum ports, a larger vacuum port, just to see what would happen. And now it's idling at like 3,000 RPM. Okay, all right. So now I pull around and do the burnout. It feels strong. I do a dry leave, right, and it feels really strong. But when I staged, the track is just slightly uphill. And what I'll generally do is right before I pull into the second beam, I'll ride the brake a little bit, get it up there, and then take my foot off the brake gently, and the brake will kind of hold it in place. But this time, because I didn't have the power assist and I was driving it from muscle memory, when I stepped on the brake, it didn't set the brake. So there was nothing to hold it in place. So as the lights came down, I rolled backwards out of the beams. And as soon as you roll backwards out of the beams, it cancels your lane. You get nothing, right? So it was a throwaway run, except for one thing. I noticed a distinct difference in the way it ran, okay? We had gotten this thing to where there was no axle hop and it launched clean and hard, okay? But this time, with those two vacuum sources unplugged, giving the engine that much more air, it hopped the back tires, right? It got an axle hop about 10 feet out, between like 10 and 20 feet out. It hadn't done that before. And what that was telling me was that in that RPM range, wherever it happened to be, that distance out, it made significantly more power just giving it that much more extra air. So now I know I'm on the right track. Even though I didn't get a time slip to validate my theory, I did get a seat of the pants reaction and a chassis reaction from the Jeep that told me, yes, you're in the right direction. So now what's the next step? Let's look at how we can get more air into this engine. First step, like I said, we fabricated a cold air induction, a Cal induction, and there's a video on that. There's a whole, if you guys aren't familiar with this Mission Improbable project, there's a playlist that covers everything from A to Z. Bring you up to speed up to this video. But like I said, we already did a cold air system and we did a video on that. So now the next step is the throttle body. Now, here's the thing about carburetors and throttle bodies. There are ways to increase their flow, the CFM, the amount of air that they can move, without drastically altering them. For instance, sharp edges around the opening, okay, can be smooth, reduced and smooth, right? Not sharp. You don't want to make them sharp like a razor, but you want to make them like just smooth, okay? You want to round all of these, so you want to reduce them as much as possible and round them as much as possible, right? So as the air enters, it's not bunching up at the opening, right? At okay. Carburetor people are familiar with this. You'll grind the choke tower off of a carburetor and then blend. Same exact concept, right? It applies across the board. Now, another thing you can do is air wants to stick to smooth surfaces, okay? So another thing you can do is you can texture the walls. You take some, in this case, or in any case really, you take like coarse emery cloth and you create sort of like a crosshatch. You get in there with your fingers and the emery cloth, and you try to create something like a crosshatch, like you'd find on a cylinder wall. And what that will do is keep the air from sticking to the cylinder or to the side of it. Actually, cylinder, sticking to the side of it, and that will increase its flow through. Okay, very basic things. These are universal concepts, and this is the type of detailing that makes a difference when you're seeking performance. Another thing you can do is when you get up inside of there, you see the shaft, the throttle shaft. Well, there's more throttle shaft there than really needs to be. So, I mean, when we open it up, you can clearly see that the atmosphere, the incoming air is going to hit some rough edges and some bumps that it doesn't need to have. So this can be flattened, it can be streamlined in the direction of airflow, right? So that this way the air just kind of glides over it instead of like hitting the bump. Also, you can clean up the edges of the throttle blade. So in other words, it's sealing the bottom side of the blade here and the top side of the blade here. So you don't want to touch the sealing surfaces, but you can dress down and smooth out the non-sealing surfaces. So it's another way. So as the air is hitting this thing as it's coming through, you're good to go, right? No restrictions or minimal restrictions. You're streamlining any aspect of the throttle blade assembly that you can. But then I noticed something unusual about this. Now, one of the things you do to increase flow, either air or liquid, is any edges that it comes across on its way out, should be beveled. They should be smooth. They shouldn't be a sharp edge, because the sharp edge catches air, right? As it goes to expand. So the air is coming through this opening, okay? And then once it reaches a larger opening, it's trying to expand. And you want to give it a smooth flow to that expansion. So these sharp edges right here will inhibit that. What you want to do is you want to bevel them, or flute them is another word. And now, doing all of these little steps, yes, very time consuming, but doing all of these little steps can take a throttle body or a carburetor like this that flows, I don't know, I'm going to guess, I'm going to say it's about a 400 CFM deal. And you can increase flow through this 10, 15% just by making those small changes. So your 400 CFM now becomes 440 CFM with no money and no real modifications. But I did find something very interesting on this particular throttle body, because now I'm taking measurements and I want to see how everything works, right? How this thing is. Because as I'm feeling it, I'm like, this is weird. I have like a lump down here, right below the throttle blade. I have like a ridge, a lump, right? So I measure, and I've got 2,360 across the top over here, but when I measure the bottom part of it, it's 185 thousandths of an inch smaller. So between the throttle blade and the mounting surface, there is almost 200 thousandths of an inch restriction there. Why would they do that? I have no clue. It's a throttle body. It only has to flow air. So now on a carburetor, you will get an hourglass shape to the throat of the carburetor, because where the booster is, in the center of that, you want to speed the air up as it passes through the booster. So a carburetor throttle bore will be slightly hourglass shaped, okay, some more than others. But the purpose there is so that as the air goes past the booster, it's sped up and it pulls the fuel through cleaner. That's the purpose of that. On a throttle body, no such situation exists. It's just air. So why they would create a 200 thousandth of an inch restriction underneath the throttle blade, I'm lost. I'm sure the engineers had a purpose. One of the things I suspect, and I could be wrong, I know we're going to go off on a weird tangent here, okay? Bear with me. Is possibly they wanted an easy performance improvement for future models, okay? Like, for instance, engineer the package, put it all together, and limit the power output to 190 horsepower. But next year you want you want a bigger number. So then you don't want to change anything because it costs money to change stuff. All you would need to do is just open the casting and pick up an extra 5 horsepower, 6 horsepower, 8 horsepower, whatever it happens to be. So by not having to re-engineer and come up with a new package, you can advertise the next year's performance improvement just by simply changing the casting. Again, see, I don't know. The thing that comes to my mind is like the 446 pack, for example. You look at the 446 pack, you look at the 426 Hemi. So now, oh God, I know this is a tangent, but there is something here, right? There is something here. So Chrysler introduces the 446 pack. Now, the Hemi was the king of the hill. That was the top option, the most expensive option. It was their prestige engine. But there was demand for a high-performance wedge, cheaper to produce, lighter, more desirable, less maintenance, less finicky. So Chrysler introduces the 446 pack. Chrysler used vacuum secondary Chevrolet carburetors, the same ones that were found on the 427, 435 Vet previous year, or in 1867, on the 440. One of the characteristics of those carburetors, and the way they had them tuned on the Chrysler, was they had a very late opening point for the secondaries. They had like whatever the heaviest spring is, they had that in there. So you didn't actually get secondary actuation until this thing was way, I mean, like you have to be like halfway, 3/4 of the way through first gear before the secondaries actually started to open. On an automatic car, it was very often that you didn't get complete carb opening at all during the course of, all right. Why'd they do that? Why'd they do that? They could have put lighter springs in there. That, no problem, right? No mystery there. Or they could have used the off-the-shelf Ford carburetors, which were Ford tri-power carburetors, which were mechanical secondary. Each of those carburetors had an accelerator pump. They're the same ones that Ford used on the tri-power, the 406s and the 427s. Same carburetors. And those are the exact carburetors that Chrysler offered over the counter through direct connection. So if you wanted to upgrade your stock 446 pack, you would buy the Ford carburetors through Chrysler, bolt them on there, and then it became a whole different animal. Why did they handicap the assembly line 446 pack with heavy springs and slow vacuum, right? Why? Because if they had put the Ford carburetors on it on the assembly line, it would have ran away and hid from the 426 Hemi, which was handicapped by a street cam. So yeah, the 426 Hemi had bigger ports, bigger valves, more carburation, had everything going for it, but it had a small cam that didn't allow it to take advantage of those things in street trim. Whereas the 440 with the smaller ports, smaller valves, similar cam, had higher velocity in the lower range. So in a drag racing situation, stock for stock, a mechanical secondary 446 pack would have ran away and hid from the 426 Hemi, which was a Prestige. So you see what I'm saying? I know, right? So is it possible? Oh God, that took a long time. That took a long time to get out during this video. It's supposed to be about the science of finding free horsepower or hidden horsepower. But I'm speculating that might be the reason why the engineers left this or had this thing neck down, so that if the following year after, the marketing people says we need more power, the engineers could have said no problem, we've already got it, and just switch out the throttle body without changing anything else. 5 horsepower, 8 horsepower, that's a pretty significant difference. 200 thousandths of an inch in this deal here is a big difference. So my mission now is to even out, right? We got to make the bottom part of this the same diameter as the top part, texture all of it, streamline the throttle blade assembly, right? The shaft and the blade itself, and then flute any openings. So make sure that there's nothing, no sharp edges for air to grab onto to slow it down. So if this is worth 400 CFM, let's say the way it sits, by the time I'm done with it, it'll probably, I don't have a flow bench to actually measure these things on, but it'll probably be worth 450, 460 CFM. That's power. That's an extra 10, or thereabouts, depending on whether your engine wants or not. Is your engine asking for it? In our case, our engine is asking for it because, like I said, that difference between 3/4 throttle and full throttle is profound, which is telling me this thing wants more air. If it's a situation where you go from 3/4 throttle to full throttle and you really don't sense anything, well, it's getting adequate airflow. Don't worry about it. This thing is literally screaming, Tony, give me more air. So we're going to give it more air, and it's going to make power. Now, that's training the athlete, okay? That's going to the gym and working out, putting in the time and putting in the sweat equity that builds great athletic performance. Well, it's exactly the same thing with your car, right? Your truck, your motorcycle, whatever it happens to be. It's taking every single one of these components, the same way an athlete trains every single muscle in its body to perform maximum, and all of its various systems, the digestive system and blood and the right diet to have the right minerals and the right everything, okay? Exactly the same thing. When you sit down at the workbench and you devote your day, because it's going to take a day to do this thing and do it right, That's the sweat equity. It's just like going to the gym. It's exactly like going to the gym and doing the things, whatever they happen to be for your athletic. Well, same thing here. And then you take this, or this concept, what we're talking about here, and you apply it to every single aspect of the vehicle. You go through any vehicle, and there's always something that can be made better. There's always something that can be made smoother. There's always something that can be made cleaner. There's something that can be made lighter. There's something that can be made more efficient. There's always a line that can be shortened. You see what I'm saying? There's always something that can be improved in some way. And it's not just a matter of throwing cash at stuff. Because a lot of people will be like, why you waste your time working with stock parts? You're just pissing in the wind. Go buy the good thing. Well, that concept applies to the good things as well. Even if you're buying aftermarket parts, they still need to be optimized. They still need to be perfectly matched to the rest of the system, the rest of the car, the rest of the vehicle. It doesn't end there. That's the difference between, let's say, a great engine builder, like a Smokey Yunick. Well, he was more than an engine builder, obviously, or Bill Jenkins. You look at the legends. And these people working with the best aftermarket parts money could buy. But they excelled better than anybody else. That's what made them legends. Why? Because of stuff like this. This is what they did. Instead of sitting home watching TV and doing that sort of thing, they were in the shop, they were sweating, they were studying every little bit of their device, whatever it happened to be working on. How can I make this rocker arm better? You know what I mean? What can I do to this connecting rod? These bolts, what can I do? Can I shorten them? Can I put lighter ones in? Can I rifle drill them? What can I do with this? And that is what makes a legend. That's what makes, a true racer. And you don't have to become a monk and just, isolate yourself in the garage and just, but at least adopt that mentality where when you look at your car, you say, how can I make that better? If I tuck the bumper a little closer, if I, whatever it happens to be, okay, whatever it happens to be. And study, because each of these things you learn about. You learn about airflow, you learn or liquid flow, you learn about, oh God, it's limitless. It's limitless. Doing this isn't just about making your car go faster, or just having something to do with your hands. It's about learning, because every one of these systems, every aspect that you work on, you're learning, you're building a foundation of knowledge. You'll learn about all of these different physics and math and it's all of it, okay? You're learning. And every bit that you learn when you're studying how a textured, surface affects airflow, you're learning principles and concepts that can be applied to everything else in your life. So you're not just building a car, you're building your brain, and you're building your body of experience and knowledge. And through the course of your life, it's going to pay dividends, because all of these things will apply, right? Okay, maybe I'm getting too philosophical at this point, but I'm telling you the truth, and I'm telling you this is how you get the most out of everything. You'll get more satisfaction. You'll get huge satisfaction out of bolting this thing on your vehicle after you spent the time working on it, and you pick up that 10th or 1500th, whatever it is, or 2 mile an hour. You'll get far more satisfaction out of doing that than you will dialing up, an aftermarket part and bolting it on and achieving the same result. I feel bad for the people who do that, because they're missing out on a big part of the satisfaction of what hot rodding really is. You know what I mean? It's a bigger picture. You make your car better, you make yourself better. All right. I hope you got something out of that. Maybe this is maybe I am nuts. I don't know. But you know what? It served me well so far. I'll see you tomorrow.